You've spent your whole life working hard, spending smartly, and saving for retirement, hopefully. And along the way, you may have even become a millionaire. So I'd like to talk about, does planning end at retirement? So, I have to tell you, I've shared with this before to Facebook Live audience, but I was a shit show in my 20s. I had a job that when I left after 7 years, I had $5,000 saved for retirement. They saved it for me. I didn't have access to a 401k. I can't begin to tell you how important that was that I had $5,000. It was everything to me. And the good news is that I saved it. I did not spend it. And as I've shared before, that turned into 25,000, and that 25,000 turned into 50,000, and then 100,000, and then 500,000, and then of course that accidental millionaire. And when you get there, you go, "Oh my God, do I have enough?" Let's talk about financial freedom and what does that really mean, and who determines that? I mean, we decide our lifestyle, and many people live off of less in retirement and have an enormously successful life. So, when you think about freedom and when you finally leave the workplace, whenever that is, it's time to celebrate. It's like you're no longer working for the man, and hopefully, you're popping some champagne. I know I would. But here's the deal, there are two major phases to retirement or stepping off. And let's talk about those two phases. The first is the accumulation phase, and the second is the distribution phase. So, being successful of stepping off really involves preparing for both of those. So, let's talk about the accumulation phase. That could last anywhere from 20, 30, 40, for some people, even 50 years. So, depending on when you enter the workforce and, of course, exit. So, during that phase, it's all about saving to build up access to money later for when you need to live off that income. So, what are the things that we need to do in preparing for that savings? So, when we work for an employer, we contribute automatically into Social Security. And so we don't necessarily realize that we're doing that, but the employer makes sure that our contribution percentage goes to the government so that we have access to Social Security later. So that's the first thing, is making sure that we are employed in a way that we have access to Social Security later. The second is some of you may have access to a pension plan. And a pension is whether you're an educator or a government worker, that they pay you fixed income later once you step off. My father had a pension at Ford Motor, and I have to tell you, back in the day, that made a huge difference when he did not have to be responsible for investing his own retirement assets. It was done through his employer, which is a dying breed, by the way. The third is 401k. And in the 70s, the baby boomers were the great experiment when all of a sudden they switched, employers, from pensions to individual 401ks. And that's when the baby boomers became responsible for their own savings in retirement. And we're not quite sure whether that was successful or not. Not many people have a lot of money in their 401ks. And so the jury is out whether giving up pensions and focusing on your individual direction in a 401k, if you have access to that, has been fruitful. And then we have IRAs, individual retirement accounts, and Roth IRAs, whether it's pre tax or after tax, and depending on the type of investment that you choose, determines whether it's taxable or not. And of course, the amount that you could put in there is based on your age and your income and your marital status, and subject to the yearly contribution limits by the IRS. And then some people use life insurance and possibly annuities. Those have their own different variable around that, as it relates to protecting what we can't afford to lose. If we're married and someone leaves the planet, how do we still stay on track for our goals? So those are some of these savings vehicles, not to mention CDs and other things that we have available to us so that we have choices later. So that when we finally do shift from saving for retirement or saving for to living in retirement. And that is the holy grail as we enter the distribution phase. And that's when you start to live off those accumulated assets that you set aside so that you have choices later in lifestyle. So, based on our, gosh, decades of experience in financial planning, this distribution phase oftentimes tends to be more stressful and uh, more stressful than the accumulation phase because you're finally there, you're in it. And so the idea of spending money with no income can be really frightening and racking people's brains as to the questions of, do I have enough? Did I save enough? Will I run out of money? Can I really afford to take this trip or buy gifts for my grandkids? Or what happens if I get sick? So all of those things come wrapping around our heads in this distribution phase. And so it's so important that we understand the planning aspects in that phase and all the different variables that come into play. So when we think about financial planning, there's not one decision you make in one area that doesn't affect another area. And what I mean by that is when you take money out of your investment portfolio, that has a tax implication and it also has a cash flow implication. So they're all interrelated. So it's important to recognize that when you review your income sources at retirement, what is the best distribution of where to take that money? Does it make sense to get it out of your savings account? Does it make sense to take it from your IRA? Does it make sense to take it from your pension? All these different things come into play in the distribution phase, and each one has a tax impact or implication to you. And so, financial practitioner's job is to figure out what bucket is the best place to take that money and what buckets are the best to work really hard to grow even further while you're in retirement so that they can grow tax free and possibly even be tax free later in the distribution phase or legacy to your children or grandchildren. So, tax planning, protection planning, retirement planning, income tax planning, estate planning. I mean, cash flow planning. All of those things are so important. And so, yes, planning does not end in retirement. I said that kind of backwards, but actually, the biggest planning actually really occurs when you hit the retirement age or when you choose to step off and no longer have income. So, no matter what phase of retirement planning you're in, it's just so important to plan because we don't even know what we don't know. So, what steps are you taking now? What steps to find your financial freedom? And what does financial freedom mean to you? So that's my question today as we talk about the two phases of retirement, and that's the accumulation and distribution. And for some reason, not quite surprising, the distribution phase is the most emotionally um, filled with anxiety as you transition into that step, something that you've worked all your life, you've envisioned it all your life, and then when you finally get there, the emotion that unfolds is overwhelming. So, all the more reason to plan. Thank you for listening. If you found this helpful, please share it with others. Please like our video, and thank you for listening to us. Take care and stay healthy.